All right, we are live. We've got Jack Petrick on the call today. For those of you guys that don't know Jack, he's based out of Cleveland, Ohio. He's into a little bit of everything, multifamily, home, single family development. He'd be big into crypto. This last year has been educating me a ton on that stuff. And so I wanted to bring him on. If you guys have ever heard anything that I've talked about before, whether it's doing these lives or on any podcast I've been on, I've always talked about one of the guys that had really impacted my life in the beginning was Jack Petrick. Here he is in the flesh. And, we want to talk about that today and kind of just talk about his journey from being a fireman to owning 750 doors, building houses like crazy in Florida, and then jumping into crypto. So, Jack, thanks for jumping on the call with me.
Absolutely, brother. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I wanted to bring you on because your story is obviously echoes mine. You were actually the first. Casey Marks introduced us or connected us
Mhm.
several years ago, and he was like, because we'd had lunch, and he's like, "Oh, I know this other fireman in Cleveland who's really doing great in multifamily. Do you know Jack?" And I'm like, "I don't know who that is." So he was like, "Oh, well, here, connected us." And I remember the first time I talked to you. We were talking kind of before the call about it, but the first time I ever spoke with you was the first time that you had talked about you had worked for Strongsville Fire, had been doing real estate investing, and then left the fire service for real estate full time. And it absolutely blew my mind that somebody left the security of the pension of the W-2, like, because nobody in the fire service leaves. I mean, once you get in, you're in for life.
Yes.
It's very different than the military, even where people sign up for 4 years and then can get out. It's in Ohio is different because our pension you can move around, so people move around a little bit more, but they don't leave the career. And
Sure.
when I remember that just after we hung up, thinking like, holy cow, like it was the first time in my mind I ever thought that maybe real estate wouldn't be a side gig; it could actually be something that would be full time, which is now has happened for me. So, do you want to talk about that? Kind of like how you got
Yeah,
into real estate, how you made that transition. I know Rich Dad Poor Dad was a big book for you that kind of opened your eyes.
absolutely. So I would in high school I was basically doing I was going to vacation vocational school and thought I wanted to be a tool and die maker, and got into that and just realized that I hated it for a career. And my one of my uncles actually suggested becoming firefighter paramedics. I'm like, that sounds like a neat idea. So I met up with some other firemen and just got some more information on like what's involved with it and what do you have to do, what does the work look like, and everything, and decided and committed to that path. So went to took my EMT basic. From there, went to do my 240, my paramedic, and was testing really, really hard, and finally got on. And then shortly after I got on Strongsville, I came across the book Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, and that book absolutely just like completely opened my eyes and my mind of looking at so many things like with an educational system. We're punished if we fail, if we get a D and F, and then people will fake it till they make it. But in fact, mistakes are the only way that we learn. And there's just so many other points that were brought up in that book. And I was not a book reader.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, I finally found some that really captivated my interest. So I initially went the path of learning how to become a custom home builder while I was at the fire department. I had no background, I had no experience, but being resourceful has always been a strength of mine. Um, so I went on Amazon. I bought every book: how to build a house, how to be a general contractor, how to wire a house, how to site a house, and just dove all in on that and became pretty obsessed at that. So my obsession kind of went from the fire service of learning, going to that whole process, getting hired, kind of then switch over to real estate at that point.
Yeah.
So, I built custom homes for a number of years until 2008. The market, just went bad after that point. So I was looking in the real estate forecast, looking at what made sense, and single family rentals, in my opinion, made the most sense. The prices were at a 50% discount. So I bought my first house for like $60,000. Previously was 120. I'm like, great, this is a great deal.
Yeah.
I had to do a full rehab to the project. It took me way too long, made every mistake you can imagine I made. So like that was like one of the things that was really helped me is just gain the confidence that I can go into something, know nothing about it, and figure it out along the way, day by day, make a bunch of mistakes, learn from it, lose some money, but then you improve and you do better on the next one until you get good at it. So From there, the housing market continued to correct and prices fell down as low as $4,000 a house. We were buying these houses up, and they were devastated. They needed a full rehabs,
Mhm.
exterior, interior, everything. But then what I realized is once we had these houses done, we had the nicest houses in the area. There were very few maintenance requests that were necessary in the project, and we can keep going into the next one, and we can keep building equity. We had great cap rates. But today looking back, you say 4,000 a house, like, yeah, that's crazy. Anybody would do that. Well, nobody was doing it
Mhm.
because at the time the market sentiment was real estate is terrible. You lose all your money, you'll go bad. There's foreclosures, divorces, like it was a disaster. Lending was difficult. So like if you really step back to that time period, it wasn't easy and very few people were doing it. Houses were sitting for months and months at $4,000 and nobody would pick them up. And we even had a land bank in our county where they were tearing the houses down if people weren't buying them. So I did that for about 13 years. Again, I cannot tell you how many mistakes were made, how much money was lost in operations and hiring the wrong crews, the wrong pay structures, the wrong quality. I made mistakes of buying cheap material because I thought I was saving money, when in fact, if I spent $30 more and got a Moen faucet with a lifetime warranty, I wouldn't have to touch that versus the plastic Glacier Bay faucets would break after 6 months on a Saturday.
Yeah.
So it just like all of that just kept building my knowledge base. And then, I got to a point after, quite a few years that we had operations really dialed in. And then, started getting to a point, I started getting the itch for what's next. And for me, that was multifamily apartments. So I came across, again, going back to being resourceful, to start off with some books on Amazon by David Lindahl. And then there was an event course that he had. So I went to that. I plugged into some other learning opportunities. Michael Blanc was another one. And they were focusing more on apartment syndication, where we're buying a stabilized asset, we're bringing investors to the table, but there's not a lot that we can do to improve the financials of the property. And in that model, you give the majority of the ownership away to investors, and you just keep a smaller portion of it. And that model for me personally didn't really resonate with me because I had spent my entire real estate career like taking really distressed assets and rebuilding them, and that's kind of was more of my swim lane. So then I came across a gentleman, Tim Bratz. He owns like over 4,000 apartments, and
Yep.
ironically, we were neighbors. We were like 7 doors down, and we were in the same real estate office. So at the time, our broker introduced me to Tim, and at the time, Tim only owned 200 units. But at the time, I was like, "You own 200 units? Like, what are you doing?"
Yeah.
So Tim was cheap at that time. I got him out for lunch for like a burger and fries or something.
Yeah.
Tim's more expensive today.
Yeah, he is.
But just started learning about the value add path of multifamily. So ultimately, that's the path that I took. And basically, what that means is we're buying an asset that's distressed, low rents, low occupancy, deferred maintenance, absentee owners, poor management, and we can go into that property. We end up doing generally remodeling the whole property, all the units. And by having a nicer property, we can raise the rents. We can bring in other income sources. And then we're looking at how can we decrease expenses throughout all the categories, which we do. And then we've now effectively have increased the cash flow of the property significantly. We can refinance the property and pay our investors off. So that's in a very quick nutshell of like how that transition happened in my real estate background. And then as far as your other question, as far as how did I make the transition from the fire department going full time? So, like Seth said, when I got hired, my intentions were to be here for my entire career. And my uncle was a police officer for the city of Cleveland, and he really pushed me hard to set up for deferred comp, which is a supplementary retirement account for fire and police. And I was putting 25%, and then I worked my way up to 30% of my entire pay in that when I got hired at like 21 years old.
Mhm.
So I would get these statements from deferred comp, and they would show it like, 25 years, 30 years, 35 years, based on these contributions, you would have this many millions of dollars. So I'm thinking at the time, like, I should be pretty good. I have that. I have a pension. And then I also have, the option of drop. So I've got 3 different buckets, but let me just dabble in this real estate at the same time and see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And then we went through a couple market crashes where my deferred comp balances got cut down in half. And then it took years for that to kind of get back up to a point where I was back at parity or back to where it started off at. And I'm just questioning, like, we just lost 5-6 years of time here. How am I supposed to hit these numbers, when that time comes? So I kept real estate as just kind of like a plan B. And it was just really meant in the beginning just to provide some supplemental income. And then I just kept on growing more and more traction with it. We kept on getting better at it. And then it really just started to dawn on me as I started getting around mastermind minds and just other people and just thinking bigger. This is one thing, Seth, that we had talked about in the past, is like our mind to grow, our mind shift has to change. We all have, to some degree, a poverty mindset, and I did. I grew up in a divorced family. I grew up very blue collar, and there's a lot that I really respect, and I'm really thankful for that. But some of the drawbacks of that is sometimes we think too small. We can't do that. What if, or what if we lose money? But we just never get out of that comfort zone. We never grow. And in the fire and police service, we have some great guys that we work with, but we also have a group of people that aren't necessarily the best for personal development.
Yeah, for sure.
So, it just really took a moment, and it took me about a year to really wrap my head around it. But I was at an event, at a multifamily event, and they made a comment there. They said, if you invest with pennies, you make pennies. If you invest with dollars, you make dollars. And if you invest with millions, you make millions. And that really resonated with me. And that's something that I really took to heart. And another thing that my buddy Josh Cantwell said, he was also very influential in my real estate transition, raising private capital. Because that's really where I learned it, from Josh Cantwell. And then, he said something that we think of our job as it's a life preserver, that it's keeping our heads above water. But in fact, it's an anchor around our neck. And when he said that, it's something that I just never forgot about. So kind of like it was a combination of both those two things really weighing in my mind, looking at the bigger picture, and seeing Tim Bratz, Mark Evans, Josh Cantwell, and these other entrepreneurs just crushing it. And it wasn't for there was no jealousy with it. I was thrilled with them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if they can do it, I can do it. And that confidence just started building up with me. And then my thinking process went from fear of leaving the fire department to a mindset of, what is the regret I'm going to have being at traditional retirement age, looking back and being like, what could I have done with the last 20 years of my career if I gave it my all?
Yep.
That was the thing that haunted me, and was ultimately the pivotal decision for me to actually pull the trigger and leave the fire department.
Yeah. I mean, and that's what is, the things that you've said are things that we've talked about over the years. And I can't even tell you how instrumental it's been for me, because you were the first one I'd ever talked to that left. And then I remember us talking about that, where, I remember asking you, like, well, what made, early on, like, what made you leave, or what made you, and that's what you had talked about, was the opportunity cost, that at some point you realized that going into the fire station was costing you more opportunity than it was by being there. And that just stuck with me. And it was like, every day that I would go in, I'm like, what am I missing out on? What, and as you scale and get bigger, you have other people that need you to, like, hey, I need you to look at this deal. Well, I can't do it today because I'm tied up for 24 hours or whatever, and it just, same thing. And it, like, you were almost like the proof of concept for me, where, like, this actually could happen. Right. And the other thing that you mentioned was masterminds. And that's something that, in the early on, I was kind of like, I remember us talking about a couple different ones. I'd call you and be like, or text you and be like, hey, have you heard of this guy? What do you think of this? Or what do you think? Because when you're starting out, like, getting into a group that costs money is scary, because you don't know if, you're going to pay, 5,000, it could be 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, 20,000. I mean, and that dollar amount is super scary when you're starting, because you're just like, you have nothing to compare it to. And like you said, with the mindset that you've had, because I'm the same way, grew up blue collar, divorced family, neither of my parents were like, personally crushing it, in their careers. And to think of like, oh my gosh, I'm going to give somebody $20,000 like for like I don't know what the return's going to be. What And so I've
Yes.
always wanted to like I need to talk to somebody that's already in it or somebody that's already doing it with them to be sure that I'm actually going to get what I want out of it. And what I've realized over time is that like, you know, what happens if you don't pay it, right? I mean, like for you, like getting into some of these rooms with Tim, I mean, you like you said, you got into it when he was cheaper, or you were able to get him to go to lunch and whatnot, and he had more time. But if you're not, I'm in his legacy family group, and I've been in it for a couple of years now. But it's because I want to get in the same room with him and other folks that are also on the same path that he's in, and again, even like I've talked to you about doing your own, like if the day that you're like, hey, I'm going to do something, I'm there, like, and I think a lot of other people would be as well. There's so many people that, being around firemen all the time. Like I've got a call later today with a fireman here locally in Columbus, that he posted something on Facebook about how he's got all, he's an entrepreneur as well, but he's just getting crushed. His mindset is getting crushed when he goes to the firehouse. And,
Yes. Yes.
he was completely unaware that there are other firemen out there that have either left or are on the verge of leaving because their entrepreneurial spirit or their real estate business or whatever it is has taken off so much. And for me, and I know for many other guys I've talked with, you're kind of like that proof of concept, or like the first one that I know of that stepped out and did it. So I think it's super important for people to understand that, you couldn't have done what you did without being in the right room, like you said, with Mark Evans or Tim Bratz, or even Michael Blanc, and most of those courses, like Michael Blanc, I know charges to be in his mastermind group. I don't know what it was back then. Like Josh Cantwell, I know you guys were neighbors or are friends, but same thing. Josh has a mastermind that he charges for, and that's what people, I think that they get scared of those things. Like I was, where, man, that, I want to learn, but it costs $10,000, and again, when you're first starting out, 10 grand's a lot of money. And
Yep.
not that it's a small amount, right? But if you spend it, you're committed.
Yep.
And I think too, like when you spend it, the guys that you're spending it with know you're serious, and they know that their time then is not going to be, because if you charge nothing or you do it for free, I mean, how many times I've been stood up by people that want to get coffee or want to get lunch or want to
Sure.
do this and that, and they end up canceling. And it's like, look, I stopped doing those things because I don't have enough time to I wouldn't say cater to every one of those people, but I just don't have time for that, because like we're running a business,
Sure.
and especially for you, like, to kind of segue into the operations, I know one of the biggest things that has caused you to be successful is you have brought all your operations in house. So you handle
Mhm.
all your construction, all your property management, and that was a big inspiration for Tim and I to vertically integrate, because we saw what you were doing and how you were operating, and we're like, man, that makes the most sense, because increasing our NOI on these properties is what drives the value.
Yeah.
And when you're using a third party property management company, they're profit based, so their interests aren't always aligned with you as the investor. And if you've syndicated the deal and you've taken people's money and you've promised them a return, how else can you truly know
Protect
that
your
you can,
capital.
yeah, that you can get that return and protect what's going on, besides bringing it in house, and we talked about it kind of briefly before the call, but it might cause you to grow slower, right? Because we both see it on Facebook all the time. People are closing on deals like all over the place. I'll see
Mhm.
folks that are, they'll close on 5 deals in 30 days, and it's great for them. But to me, I'm like, I don't know how you can properly manage all of those properties. Yeah, you can have an asset manager, but to really, down to the penny, know what is going on, and with the crews and whatnot. So how did that work for you? So you went from single family, or you went from trying to be a custom builder, single family, got into some groups that were thinking bigger, doing bigger things. You changed your mindset, got into apartments, and
Sure.
then at some point in there, and maybe it was from early on, you integrated to where you manage your properties and your construction. And I don't know how big your staff is now. I know at one point it was around 20 people, but um, you know, how is that, do you feel, has affected the values of your properties? How is how do your investors feel about that? And then as far as growing goes, you could be at 4,000 units by now if you wanted to be, but you're kind of hanging out in the 750 to 900 range. I know you're kind of, you've been right around that area. What's making you like, what's the value of staying in that right now
Yeah.
versus, going to 4,000?
For sure. So yeah, let me just step back to one previous point you made about masterminds. Like when I had left the fire department, I lost my income. I lost my retirement. I lost my healthcare benefits, and I immediately joined another mastermind. So I dropped all my income and then took on something that I was going to, but it was so impactful. And like,
Yeah.
what you have to realize is you're going to pay for your education one way or the other. You're going to pay through lost opportunity. You're going to pay through mistakes, or you're going to pay to get in a room, get really motivated. And like the point you had said it previously, you've got to pay attention. We have access to more free information right now than we've ever had in the existence of the world. YouTube, Google, you can find anything you want, but when you pay attention. So it's just, that was something that was really pivotal and something I also struggled with. Going back to your other question, as far as like how I integrated and how I did it, it's not for everybody what I had done. When I raised private capital from investors, my highest priority is the preservation of their capital. You have to, the way that I look at it is, in order to be successful, you can't look at what you want out of it. You have to look at what everybody else wants out of it, and you have to try to make sure that those goals are met. And if you meet the goals of all those other people, then ultimately I win if everybody else wins first. So preservation of capital for our investors and the return of their capital, the safety of their capital, is the first fundamental goal that we have and the first focus. Then it goes to my crews and the people that we have going with us, or vendors. And then lastly, for me, I'm the last one to take profits from a building. But if you run it that way, if we shoot for the long-term game, that's where we're going to ultimately going. So I know of a lot of people that are scaling fast or scaling big. And if you look at how many doors they have versus what I have or somebody else has, that's oftentimes the metric that everybody looks at, but that really, it's a worthless metric.
Yes.
What is the percentage that you own of those 4,000 doors? Are they profitable? Are they making money? Those are the metrics that really matter. There are some people that own 50 single family homes that are crushing it, making more money than somebody with 4,000 apartment units.
Yes.
There's also a lot of people that have scaled heavy and fast, and then get into and getting into the multifamily space, especially if you get into typical syndication, get into thousands of units. There's a lot of parties. There's a lot of people involved. You need a lot of people for that. And it's easy where things can fall apart. And like you said, third-party management doesn't have the same interest that you do. So again, there's some people that have had great success with it. I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying, for me personally, these are just the direction that I had went for what I had went for. And integrating that internally is what made the most sense. One of the things that made sense to me, if you get into a car accident, the auto body shop, they don't tell the insurance company what it's going to cost. It's opposite. The insurance company who's cutting the check, they dictate the rules as far as, what are we willing to pay for this? So that was a huge piece for me with working with contractors is setting flat rates. I spent years in the single family world paying hourly, thinking I was saving money, and I got crushed just about every single time in doing that. Stealing, theft, incompetency, working with cheap crews and having to redo work. So again, that was all kind of the single family learning mistakes that I made. Once I started really ramping up the apartment side, and once I had credibility, I was raising capital, we grew pretty fast within the first couple of years. And then I hit a point where, I was going to have a difficult time in scaling the units that had to be rehabbed unless I can really increase the efficiency of that.
Mm-hmm.
I went to like vocational schools and tried bringing some kids that are out and that were fresh so we could mentor. I brought in basically, I tried everything essentially just to save some time. And I had this moment, and I was thinking about it, because in Ohio we have a group of people called the Amish in Ohio. For those who aren't familiar with it, you could Google it. But they're very people that are just very simple means. A horse and buggy. They don't use electricity, but they're really primarily they just mainly work in the trades. Very dedicated group of individuals. So I'm like, how do I reach out to the Amish? And again, they don't have email. There's no website
right.
that path. So like it's literally a horse and buggy is the transportation mode. So I'm like, but the Amish read the newspaper, right? So I found a newspaper, ran ads, and found a number of crews, and then we trained them. So now I was bringing a much better quality workforce in. I had to pay them more, but the cost wasn't what I was paying them. The cost was the fact that I had 60 apartments that were down and vacant, and we're losing 60,000 a month. That's
Yes.
what the cost was. So that's what you got to really look at what are your costs, what are your numbers. When you hire a third party property management company, the cost isn't the percentage they're charging you; it's the evictions, delinquencies, mistakes, turnovers, tenants that are not renewing with you. That's the cost that they're really charging.
Yeah.
So what we did going back to the contractors is I broke everything down, reverse engineered it. So to set a toilet, to do a diverter valve, to install a faucet, vanity, all the way down the list, how much are we paying per item? So we put together a flat rate list. So if you go in the apartment and we're doing a full rehab and we're executing on these 50 renovation points, this job is going to pay $4,000, very similar to what an insurance company would do. And that really allowed us to scale. Now we're not babysitting. Now we know we can control the cost.
Mm-hmm.
We're paying them a fair rate. And once their proficiency and knowledge increase, they're making really good money. And that was also a mind shift switch for me. Being blue collar, when people started making really good money, it was like I wanted to just claw back, like they're making too much money. That's the wrong mindset.
Mm-hmm.
If you get people that are good, that are competent, that are qualified, that they can make you money, that are A players, let them rip loose, let them make really good money, keep them with them, and scale with them. So that was just kind of, again, just some transition mindsets. And, we end up bringing operations in house with management, property management, leasing. That's worked for us, having a smaller portfolio. But again, if you're getting into 5, 6, 8, 10,000 units, that may not work for you. But for what we're doing, it worked for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that that's something that people don't think about. I guess two things is, like you said, the cost that, what's the real expense? The real expense is what's just going out the door every day by the vacancies, the evictions, that it, I always talk to our team about that, is that the cost of that unit sitting there every day is we're hemorrhaging money every day when that thing sits there. And so to build out the efficiencies, like the hourly rate to me doesn't really matter if we're super efficient. So if they can turn 2, 3, if we can go from turning 2 units in a week to 3 units in a week, or 2 units in 2 weeks to 3 units, like we'll make up our money on the back end where that unit isn't sitting vacant that long.
Yeah.
And and getting the right people in, and the same thing is, I've experienced some of that. Like the last year, we've had trouble with contractors. Both we brought in a group that we thought was well recommended, that showed very well, that started off doing a lot of great work for us. But like most contractors, they can't, I shouldn't say most, let me back that up. A lot of contractors I've dealt with, they have a hard time saying no, or like, hey, you've given me too much, or hey, we can't do that. Right. They're like, yeah, we can do that. Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, that we can, and they overcommit. And then, like for this gentleman, what ended up happening was he started off really great doing solid work, but we crushed him. We gave him way too much, and he never said no. And so then the wheels started coming off, and the quality of work was gone, and he was running all over the place to different sites trying to oversee the people that were there. And so we've grown in that aspect. But then on the opposite side, we went to another group that was supposed to be a top tier, like grade A contractor group that had the great office, that had all the great marketing, that just looked great. And the same thing is that they ended up not being able to meet timelines. They ended up not, they were supposed to be turnkey for us. And we're like, great, this, what a great solution to our previous problem. But when we went to them, is the same thing, is that, they overpromised and then completely underdelivered. And so it really forced us then to kind of like what you realized was, if we find great people and we bring them in house and we give them benefits, we make them W-2 employees, like, that's the route that we went. We are able to control what they do more, and then we have consistency. So yeah, it might cost me, we might pay them a great hourly wage. They get benefits, all those different things, which are a cost, but in the end, we're turning units way faster with quality work. And then they know what we expect. And then, something that is great about multifamily is, like, we use the same flooring for every unit. We use the same paint. We use the same cabinets. We use the same toilets, everything. And so as they kind of get into the system and they understand like what we're doing, we always try to say, like, if you go into one of our units, you go into all of our units. The layout might be different, but the look is the same in every one of them. Doesn't matter what city it's in, doesn't matter where it's at. This is how we do it. And it just helps them become super efficient quickly. So, that is why we decided to bring construction in. And then the same with management is that, you know, a lot of management companies will promise the world, you know, and
Mhm.
I feel like they really try, you know, some of them are just terrible from the get go. And a lot of people, I think, as investors, don't know how to interview a management company to know if they're the right fit. The management company will say, "Sure, we'll take on your 50 units or 20 units or 100 units," but, you know, have they ever managed that asset class? If they're
Sure.
very good at managing class A, class B, and you're trying to get them to manage class C, again, like the contractor, they might have no idea what they're actually getting into, and it's a whole different animal doing class C or even class, like maybe C minus apartments, you know, and you're trying to make that transition from C to B or whatever it is. Or they'll what we've experienced is they'll say, yeah, I can handle the construction, right? They can manage, and then they have contractors or whatever they can use. And we've had a lot of trouble. That's why we ended up bringing management in house. Was we could never really know what our budget was going to be because every unit would be different. The quality of work would be different.
Yeah.
You know, it was just really, you know, we just really struggled with that, and just as they did. And I mean, and it's not easy vertically integrating. You know, most guys, I don't think vertically integrated at either of our unit counts. That usually, you know, I see people go to 1,000 units or a couple, you know, where their volume is bigger, so they think that it's time to do it. But you know, like you, that's what Tim and I, you know, we had no way to really predict or control the costs. And when we decided to take on other people's money, you know, we took it really serious, and in the fact that
Sure.
that was the only way that we could really kind of make it a more stable process was controlling those unknowns. And that's really, I think, for, you know, a lot of folks is, you know, like you said, people are closing deals all the time, but you never hear like, how is that deal actually going? And I know several people that have bought deals where the wheels have kind of come off of it, and then they don't really know what to do. And it's the same thing with investors. I've talked to investors that have either been thinking about investing with us or have, and they've come out of bad situations, and they kind of got, you know, they went with somebody, and either they got no return or their capital was lost or, you know, whatever, and they're kind of gun shy on doing it again.
Sure.
But, you know, we have found that by being vertically integrated, it builds their confidence back, or they're more confident with, you know, choosing us over all the thousands of other people that are doing what we do.
Exactly. And the other benefit when we vertically integrate, it's a few different things. Like Seth, you had introduced me to an amazing contact at Lowe's, and previously I was working with Lowe's, and we were able to just get just really incredible pricing. And because the majority of our buying power is coming through that specific store or that contact,
Mhm.
I was able to negotiate prices in some cases were as high as 80% off of retail. A P trap that would cost close to $4, we're buying it for 80 cents. But with going this path, I can do all the work and lock in that pricing once, and then over and over and over and over again, keep getting those savings. When I was looking for flooring is one of the most expensive items we
Mhm.
put into the property. And it's the most expensive item that we're going to have to replace down the road. And I really wanted to go the path of luxury vinyl flooring. So I had some resources in Cleveland, Ohio. I wasn't thrilled with the pricing. There was an international flooring convention in Las Vegas. It was the next day that I found out about it. So I talked to my wife. She said, "You're crazy," but I booked a flight. I flew out to Vegas. I had no hotel. I had no car, but I knew it would work out. And I'm like, "Yeah, I'll just get a room in Vegas." Well, they had 3 conventions going on. Like everything in the vicinity was either full or it was like quadruple the price. So if I got that all figured out, I walked down this enormous, enormous facility, and the first aisle is like Columbus, Ohio, like 2 hours from me, is a flooring supplier, and we've been buying from them ever since. And literally every container of flooring that we bought, because we buy containers of
Mhm.
flooring, it was a savings of 30 grand. Like
Yeah.
I probably had enough savings to buy a Ferrari with the savings. Like what you put forth that effort, and you can recoup that benefit unit after unit after unit. You're also putting higher quality items in. So when we're putting in smoke detectors, and we're putting a 10-year sealed lithium ion battery, because at this point, if I didn't go that route, I would have like over 2,000 smoke detectors that we'd have to go around and change, once, twice a year,
Yeah.
depending on what you like. That's crazy. So if you put in quality smoke detectors, quality faucets, higher quality commercial grade flooring, and the list can go on and on with it, but you're going to reduce your maintenance demand. You're going to reduce your maintenance calls. You're going to reduce your turnover expenses. If you do it once, do it right in the beginning. you're gonna bleed out a lot less down the road. So do it once and do it right.
Yeah, 100%. And we've seen that, the first property I ever bought, we did that. And that was why, because when I look back at it now, like our maintenance costs are almost nothing, because, you're going to have the random thing pop up, but because you
Yeah,
put
of
quality
course.
material in, everything's lasting longer. And you're doing it right. That's part of the problem, or what burns people out is, the mom and pop is always trying to save money. They're always trying to pinch pennies, because a lot of them are living off of the cash flow. And so if they spend the cash flow on properly maintaining the property, they may not have enough to pay for their living expenses. And so you see people will cut corners and they'll put in cheaper material. And that's something that I think that two things that I'll touch on is the CapEx budget. When you're underwriting a property, or you're putting, you're going to buy an apartment building, I think one place that I've seen people really get in a tough spot is when they underestimate the CapEx budget, when they
Mhm.
don't know how to really judge what the cost of a unit, a unit renovation of $10,000 3 years ago is hardly anything today with the cost of material and labor and all the different things. And so if people haven't adjusted their numbers, or, it's just like if you're house flipping and you go in and you underestimate the CapEx budget and your ARV ends up being something way, you go way over budget. It's the same thing where people will get into these big properties and they want to go in and renovate everything correctly, but they've underestimated the CapEx budget. They get halfway done. Now they're out of money. And the only option is to then slowly do it out of the cash flow, which is not ideal. Or they have to do a capital call to the investors and say, hey, we need more money, which it doesn't make you look very good to investors when you got to come back and ask for more money. So that's, again, it's another reason why to get into a mastermind and get in around folks that are already doing it, because they can teach you how to underwrite and judge that CapEx budget correctly. And so that when you do get your deal done, it doesn't go sideways. And I'd say the other part that, and I'm not sure on your experience with this, is but the financials. I have seen a lot of people, and even for us, it has been, we haven't bought anything in 2023 or 2022, excuse me, because of that reason, right? The financial piece of running this many properties, of vertically integrating, I mean, it is staggering the amount of data you have to create, just even the way that you have to record everything, the accounting aspect. If you're not, again, we've outgrown, I think, 3 accounting groups now. When we're actually in the process of looking to move into one that's in Cleveland, because that's the thing, is that people outgrow who they're with, and if they don't recognize it early, it can become a problem. So have you seen that for you guys,
Absolutely.
is as you've kind of scaled the financials, or the accounting, or those kinds of things, you've had to adjust, or ran into problems?
Even sometimes with your staff members, you outgrow them as well too, and it's hard. It's just at the end of the day, my primary obligation is to my investors and their capital and their preservation of capital. And I've had a number of employees. There was a team member that I had to let go, and it was hard. It was somebody that I knew for a long time and had been with us, but it really had provided a lot of opportunity to try to get a lot of items corrected. It was costing us a lot of money, and it just came to a point that the investor and the businesses had to be a priority of that. So oftentimes, a lot of times we have a gut check with people, with groups, with businesses, with entities. They're
Hmm.
delivering, they're not delivering. A lot of times we'll make excuses for them, or they'll make excuses. And sometimes there's definitely reason to give people grace, but there's a point where you have to decide when it's time to cut the parachute and just go to your backup reserve. And one of the comments you had made before about scaling with contractors, that really resonated with me, because when I had a my apartment count was a lot smaller. The crews that were with me then are not the crews that are with me now. And the same thing, we can do it. And they just kept on hiring a bunch of people to bring him in that were unskilled, no
Hmm.
tools, minimal experience, and it was just a mess. So to have all of your eggs in that basket is not good. It really helps diversify, and having multiple crews, multiple private lenders, multiple agents and brokers that are bringing deals to you. And really the safety in that is I've really just feeling all those various topics of having numbers of people I don't want to say disposal, but part of your team
Hmm.
that are accessible, that you can count on, that can be there. Because regardless if it's this business or whatever your endeavor is, it's the team around you that's going to allow you to be successful again, if you support them, compensate them, and you provide the right environment for them. And I haven't always done that perfectly. There's plenty of mistakes that I've made. I've lost some great team members in the past because of mistakes I've made. And it's unfortunate. It's just, it wasn't intentional. It's just part of it, but it's just being real with yourself and, and just evaluating, when those events happen and learn from that and move on.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. How are you guys handling your accounting? Are you guys doing, do you guys have a group up in Cleveland that you work with that's like really big? Because that's the one thing that I think for us right now is like it's interesting because like you said, you almost want to, when you start, at least for us, when we start to feel that we're outgrowing somebody or a group,
Yeah.
it's like, the longer I feel like you kind of hang on to that thinking like, oh, maybe it'll get better, or hey, we'll have this conversation, and then and then you're like, hey, this is the fifth time we've had this conversation, or hey, this hasn't gotten any better. And like, for us, it was accounting where, we were with a group that was, had been in an accounting group for another property management company that was bigger than we were, doing well, but they hadn't done syndication kind of accounting before because it's a different animal. Like if you don't, if you're doing syndications, K1s, all the different people have to get paid, all, even with your capex versus your maintenance and repairs and all the different GL codes and all the different things that you have to keep track of. If you're not with the right group, it can really cause the wheels to come off of your project, because it's very hard to, when you're trying to make quarterly payouts to investors, but yet your financials are 6 months behind or 3 months behind, or it really kind of mucks up everything and muddies the water. So for you, like, how have you found success in that? Because I know that you guys are, I've seen you where you guys have sent, your checks out and everything's, not to say that you guys don't have hiccups as well, but
We
that's
do.
part of, I think that is not talked about a lot, is everybody wants to talk about raising capital and buying deals and, hey, we're under contract on this. Hey, we're under contract on that. But nobody's really talking about kind of like the behind the veil. Like, these are the real struggles of syndicating or running these big projects. And it doesn't matter who you are. Everybody's having them at some level.
Sure, exactly. And speaking of that, like this business, there's going to be tons of hurdles, problems, and issues that you have to work through on a day-by-day basis. After enough years, enough time in the seat, enough mistakes you made in bringing the right people in, it does get a lot easier. And I'd say, like, just kind of piggybacking off of that, the entrepreneur path, it's been financial freedom, but it's been time freedom. It's been the bigger piece, in that process of getting here. And it's not perfect at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to be willing to deal with a lot of issues, a lot of problems, and a lot of stress. The issues that would really stress me out 5 years ago don't faze me today, because it's like, we're trying to close an apartment. The investor falls out. We're short 200 grand. We got to close. Money's hard. Like, things are like imperative. Like it's worst case scenario, and you get through it.
Mm-hmm.
And the next event is worse, and you get through it. And the next event is even far worse than that. Like, I've had some real doozies over the number of years. And every time it's worked itself through. So just it builds a confidence that no matter how bad it gets, you've been there in the past, you've been able to get through it, and you get through it again. And going back in your accounting, specifically your accounting question, one of the things that we've done here is, and that, to be perfectly honest and transparent, in the growth phase of trying to get all these units done, that's been the piece of our business that's been one of our weaker pieces. So I have one property manager that's incredible at bookkeeping within AppFolio, our property management software. Our other property managers weren't as strong in the area. And I also had my office out of Strongsville trying to assist, but there was just too many people, and the coordination between all those parties weren't really working as effectively as it should. So we finally kind of made the decision and found the right person, bring in a full-time in-house bookkeeper. And that person right now is in the process of being trained. The goal is to have them do the bookkeeping for all the properties so that our reports are more relevant. They're faster. The data is more accurate. I had a contractor that had worked with us for years. And what he was doing, thank God my office manager found it. He would do a mobile deposit on a check, let the check sit for 6 months, change the date on it, then physically redeposit it back to the same bank, and they would cash it. And that's something that if we, had a little bit tighter bookkeeping process to be tracking the check numbers, we would have caught that sooner. Thankfully, we got all of our money returned on that, but bookkeeping is extremely critical, and that's an area, to be totally honest, that we definitely have some weaknesses on that we are improving. But it just over the last number of years, what it's been priority wise is just what is the biggest issue in our business that's going to put us out of business. And for a long time, that was, we got to turn these units as fast as possible. I had one building that alone was $40,000 a month that we were losing because we bought the property with such low occupancy. So what are those really big fires that we have to focus on? And now as we're wrapping up on that, our focus really is now turning back over into operations now that the remodels are slowing down, and just really reevaluate everything we're doing, what's going well, what's not, what can we tighten up with, and just really just trying to get that really dialed in even further.
Yeah, no, that's great. And it's great to, and this is the reason why, if you're watching, this is why masterminds can be so amazing and so effective, is because, I get into a room with Jack and other high level operators, and this is what we talk about. And like something that Jack's going through, I might have a solution for, or something that I'm going through, he might have a solution for. Hey, have you tried this company? We've had a lot of success with this. That's exactly what happened recently when I said we're going to go to a group in Cleveland. Is we just had Scott Hanus down with Fortitude HR Solutions. I met him through Tim Bratz and in the Legacy Family Group, and that was something that Scott had talked to us about it, because we were talking about this in just the, with Tim and I meeting with him, and we're talking about some of the bottlenecks and what's going on. And he's like, well, have you guys tried this group? Because that's who Tim uses, and they're doing all the accounting for his 4,000 doors. And I'm like, well, shoot, if they're, they've got like 80 people, and, if they can handle his stuff, they can easily handle our stuff, and they're already familiar with the process. And, those are the conversations that are had with high level folks. And I think that, the other part of it is getting in the right room with people, is that it opens your mindset, because, when I bought my first deal, we paid 1.7 million for it. And I remember sitting in my daughter's gymnastics class and talking to my wife and just being like, I could not believe, like $1 million, like a property that was over $1 million. Like that was such a pie in the sky number to me that like, I just couldn't stop saying it. I couldn't believe it. And now it's like, we're doing $10 million properties. We're doing, bigger stuff. I remember when one of the conversations we had, you were buying, I think 180 unit up there in Cleveland. And I remember that you had money go hard, and it was super scary. And it was like the biggest deal at the time that you had ever done. And, it was a growing point for you as well. But that's the thing that I think that I love about getting in the right rooms with people, is that, if you're a single family person and you're buying, you're used to buying $50,000, $100,000 homes or whatever, and you're flipping them, and you're making 10,000, 20,000, 50,000, whatever it is that you're making on your deal, like that's great. And $1 million deal sounds super scary until you're sitting at a table with people doing them every day. And then you're like, oh man, it really is obtainable. And then when you're doing $1 million deals, 10 million sounds super scary until you're in a room at a table with guys that are doing 10, $20 million deals all the time. And it just goes on. The minute that you think that you've kind of arrived and you're like, man, this is, we're killing it. You go sit in a room with somebody that has 4,000 doors, or somebody that has, like, you got 750 doors, but you own 90% of those 750 doors. Like that's a completely different situation than a guy that owns 30% of every deal that he does. And,
Sure.
and so that's, I think I want people to understand, is that we've talked about mindset on when I do these, we've talked about different things, but, getting in the right room with people is so important for your personal growth, but also for, wherever you're wanting to scale to. And getting in there with, like I said, that's been why, for me, our friendship has always been a benefit, because, I've tried to help you a couple different times with stuff and kind of remove some bottlenecks. But, really for me is that you've done that for me a ton with just my, early on with my mindset of seeing that leaving the fire service could actually be a success. And that, again, sticking around for another 12 years is what I had to do. And, I did 8 years in Florida, and I did 14 in Ohio. I would have had to stick around for another 11 years to get a full pension. And in that 11 years, my wife and I sat down and we were like, okay, here's what my top 3 years are. Here's what my pension would probably be. Here's how much money I would make in the next 11 years. If I can make in the next 11 years that money in real estate plus my pension. So let's say I lived to be, I retired at 52, lived to be 80 or 82, let's say 30 years. What does that dollar amount look like? And if I can realistically see myself making that money in real estate in the next 11 years, why would I stay? And once I had that number, that was a conversation that spurred from a conversation with you where you had done the same thing. It was like, like all of a sudden I'm like, what am I doing? Like
In reality on that subject, like how many guys do we know that leave the fire police service and go back to working a full-time job?
Every one of them.
Yeah, so it's there's just this blind faith that the pension will take care of it. Well, pension is just a percentage of what you made. Now you're tacking on $1,400-$1,600 of healthcare. Like, you can't live off of that. You have to take the time to have the interest to some degree of financial literacy. And really, the number that you have to make up isn't that large if you're willing to believe that and think past that. Because you're not going to be able to have any sort of decent quality of life just going that path. And it's interesting, like when I left at 15 years, I actually took the funds that would have been for my pension and put it in some deals. And the amount of criticism that I got from my coworkers, it's like it was, and I get it. Like, that's what they're used to. I get it. And I remember other guys that had left, and I'm like, that didn't really make sense. But when you really think about it, like, if 15 years, let's say that I had left, those funds in the pension. And again, in 15 years, the pension benefit is very small because I didn't put it in 25, 30 years, but it would have been like $1,200 in 10 years. So $1,200, like, I make like $5,000 a month in just quarters from the washers and dryers.
Yeah.
Just from the washers.
Yeah. I remember you posted a picture one time of like the hallway at your house where all the quarters were lined up, and you had said something like the amount you made in a month of laundry service was more than you were making at the firehouse just from the quarters that were in the machines. I remember that. That was,
and that's a job for my kids, because we bought this like amazing quarter counting machine off Amazon. They can wrap a roll of quarters in 15 seconds. So basically, I pay my kids flat rate to teach them motivation, but if they hammer out, they can make like $30 an hour wrapping quarters.
Yeah.
So like, it's more than just money. It's time freedom, but it's also just trying to set examples, showing your kids. My wife's a successful business owner, and just what you can do, and like the life that they have now that we're available. We can take them to places, events, horseback riding. We can go to Florida for 3 weeks at a time. This is afforded because we took a risk. We put a lot of hard work into it. There's going to be days that are really, really terrible. There's going to be days that are amazing. It's the highs and lows of, and part of the also for me of like stretching my mind, there was a lot of personal development books, like David Goggins, like he's amazing. Jocko Wilkins, Darren Hardy. And again, I'm not a book reader. I was an average C student, like at best. I didn't go to college, but like, I feel like the entire educational path today is so backwards. Go to college, come out $200,000 in debt, and that's when your education ends, and you never do anything beyond that. The path that we're on, it's mentorship. It's like having an apprenticeship again, which was so useful back in the day. But you're learning from somebody's direct experience. But again, there comes a cost at that. But that cost is going to be through mistakes. It's going to be through lost opportunity. And if I could go back and do it again, I would have definitely spent a lot more money and time and gotten a lot sooner into masterminds, podcasts, self-development, and really pursued that a lot harder, a lot faster, a lot sooner. If I were buying apartments instead of single family homes in 2010, like my net worth would be way different. And I'm not regretting it, but it's just something looking back.
Yeah.
I think also just being in a room with these other individuals is that you learn about other opportunities as well. So I got involved in the crypto through Mark Evans' mastermind. Some of the guys got into that, brought a mentor in. And I didn't want to repeat the same mistakes I did in real estate, where I was just self-taught the entire time. So we brought a crypto mentor in, and it's awesome about it. Crypto is very volatile. Crypto is way down right now. But when I bought real estate for $4,000 a house, guess what? Real estate market was pretty down, and people didn't have a real great sentiment of that either. Either it's going to do really well or it's going to get crushed. People think, one or the other, and time will tell who's right on that side. But if we have cash flowing assets and we have financial stability, we can afford to take some other investment or risk or gambles, however you want to look at it, into some other opportunities. It may not be crypto for you. Maybe it's buying a value-add business. Maybe it's something else. one of the other guys that I met in my in Mark Evans' mastermind is involved in forex trading. So I got involved in that about 8 months ago. It's been hitting 7% net per month. It's been doing great. I've tested it. I've pulled my principal out twice just to make sure I can liquidate a really heavy position. And again, it's been an amazing investment. But I'm not fully focusing all my chips on that. I've got a good stable base of apartments. I've got some crypto positions. I've got the forex trading, which has been doing amazing. I'm also building homes down in Florida with two of the partners. We've got 40 homes currently under construction. We've got another about 45 lots that we own that we're in process of getting permitting right now. So it just allows, and actually those partners that I met through Josh Cantwell's mastermind. So like, what was the cost of the mastermind? Well, I learned about raising private capital. I learned about iPlan Group and how to raise money through a self-directed IRA. I met my two partners that we, are building this amazing business together. So like, it's not just what you learn, it's the partnerships, it's deal flow, it's the experience, it's the referrals. It's a super value. It's priceless when you really look at what the ROI is, when you can get past that.
Yeah, and I would agree. I have not joined the DM family yet. I've been looking at that. I've talked to Mark a couple times about doing it. I haven't jumped in yet, but like in Tim's group, that the reason I got in it thinking kind of like, well, I don't know what this is going to be like. There's a lot more people in it than I thought there would be initially, and and I've told him this, that it was so big that it was almost like you just it would take like 2 years for you to get to know everybody. And they've come out with like a directory now where you're like, you can look through and see whatever, because you do 2 or 3 events a year. You can go there, but even then you're not going to be able to meet and talk to have everybody that's there. But you can look through and see who's in the group and then reach out to them specifically. And I think that that's something that has been helpful, is that it's not just like Tim's great, but he's not like he's not the sole focus of everybody that's in there, right? Is that he's got the draw, so he brings the crowd in. But the people that I've met in there, the relationships that I've built, have opened doors for a ton of other stuff and other growth, and even things that we have coming down the pipeline for us. We have 2 deals that we're looking at right now that are great apartment deals. We've got a development that's in the works. We've got another one that we were looking at yesterday. We've offered on another big chunk of land here in Licking County, which is a suburb of Columbus, which Intel is building in. And so it's just a great time to look at development. It may not be a great time to look at development everywhere in the country, but here in Central Ohio right now, I mean, it's craziness. And all of those things, or those relationships, like you said, have come from that. I know even for crypto, for you, I had kind of like wanted to dabble in crypto and like learn about it a little bit, but then you had hooked me up with a group that you put together for Hex and some other things. And I mean, it was like, wow, like it was way over my head when I first started like looking into it. And, I'm like at ground, like a baby level entry. But it's just stuff like that where, without being in some of these groups, you would never been exposed to that, and I know when like you said, you brought in a crypto kind of like mentor to kind of get you guys started. Like how, like one, you never would have found that person. You never would have been able to probably get that person's time, but Mark could get it. And the same thing with Tim. There's people that Tim has come to these events that speak or come there and you can meet, that you never would have met them otherwise, because they wouldn't have given me the time of day, right? I'm a no, even though I might be doing great, I'm a nobody to them, but Tim Bratz can get them on a call, or Mark Evans can get a hold of them and get them there to where you can be in the same room with them. And like you said, it's just grown. It's helped you grow exponentially in other things besides just apartments.
Sure. And there's that saying that you're going to be the average of the 5 people that you spend your time with. And if the top 5 people you spend your time with are just bitching, complaining, like gas prices, politics, all the things we can't control, it's not going to serve us or take us to where we want to go. Mm-hmm. That's not to say that we can't have friends that we have different views on, or family members, but we just got to really reevaluate the people that we're spending our time with, that we're listening. Because if you listen enough to somebody, you're going to start to believe it. And what do you want to believe? Do you want to believe that the risk is too high, or do you want to believe that the opportunity is worth it? It's life is short. I'm 42 right now, and I look back, it's like, how did the last 20 years go by like this? And 40 to 60 and 60 to 80, it's time to check out. Like, life, it's too short to have regrets. You're gonna have mistakes, but what do you want out of life? And for so many people, they're in a career path or a path in life or relationships where they're not happy with. Well, we have the ability to change it, but you got to get around the right people, the right thinking process, the right mindset. Like David Goggins, like if You Can't Hurt Me, his book, like, it's amazing. If to get the Audible version, if you don't like to read, like, get the Audible version.
Just the Audible is amazing because of
whatever your excuse is, like you don't have time, well, turn the TV off. Like there's always a reason, and that's what comes down to so many people. I feel like people either make it happen or they make excuses. It's one or the other, whatever the path is. But if you listen to David's book, just a quick recap. Was an African American, grew up in a terrible environment. His father was basically a pimp, made them work the night shift at the bowling alley. He was sleeping during school. He had to like fail his way through school and fake it. Wanted to go and get into the service. He was like over 250 pounds. He dropped 100 pounds. He couldn't swim, became a Navy SEAL, failed at that, went through it again. Like the amount, he had the world record of pull-ups, and his hands were blistered off, and his, like, just the stuff that he's accomplished is just unbelievable. And his mindset. And when you get around the other people that have succeeded, have done these almost next to impossible tasks, like, we're all capable of doing it, but we just got to get out of our own way in our own lives and out of our head and actually do it.
No, that's great. And Goggins is unbelievable. And I remember when I heard that book, like I said, I do a lot of audio listening because if I'm in my vehicle or home or whatever, I do podcasts and books, and the audio book of that was amazing because they read the chapter, but then he gets on and talks a lot more, kind of like behind the scenes. So if you've never read that book, I would highly recommend reading it. Same thing. We base a lot of our business stuff off of Jocko's principles. If the team fails, it's my fault. Right. And we really just own that, have the ownership that he talks about is amazing. I think he's got 2 books out. I've read both of those, unless he's got a third that I don't know of, but yeah, 2 great guys.
But what did we learn in the fire service? If there's a mistake, it's the chief's fault. It's the lieutenant's fault. It's captain's fault. It's never our fault. They didn't train us. They didn't show us to do this. It was always never me, always them. And it's the total opposite. I own it.
Yep. 100%. So, well, I won't keep you any longer, Jack. I know it's been about an hour, and I really appreciate your time. Like I said, it's if people don't know who you are, that hopefully they'll kind of research you a little bit after this. But I mean, it's a super huge privilege to have you come on and talk with us for an hour. And, I greatly appreciate your time.
That's awesome. Yeah. If people want to connect, you can find me on Facebook. I'll throw out my cell phone number, 440-552-8483, 440-552-8483. If there's somebody that, has questions or wants to make a pivot, wants to learn, the Forex trading, or just try some different paths, or get connected to Josh Cantwell, Mark Evans for a mastermind or something, like, if it could be a resource like that. It's just been one of the coolest things of this transition of, like, a lot of people helped me get out of where I was to help get me where I'm at. And I'm definitely want to invest some time to help people, get that slight redirection if necessary. I don't have a lot of time that I can share, but I can free up some time here and there.
Yeah, no, that's great. And that's the same way Tim and I are. That's why we started the Firehouse Pros platform, is because, we wouldn't be where we were at today if people hadn't given us time. If you hadn't have given me time back when I was doing my first deal, I don't know that I would have made it through, and I know that a couple of times I called you early on, and I remember you were like, we talked before, then I closed, and the first rent checks came in, and I was like super below what I thought it would be. And you're like, oh, like, you don't have enough capital. Like, you got to go raise some money. And I was like,
I remember that.
I was like, holy cow. Like, what, and that was it. But it was just that direction that all I needed was somebody to kind of point me in the right direction. And that's why I tell people, like, pay for the training wheels, right? If you can be around somebody that can help you get where you want to go, and you're like that, just, it was probably 2 or 3 phone calls. It wasn't anything crazy. It wasn't like a ton of time, but it was just enough of like the right bump in the right direction that I needed to be able to, cause that deal to refinance it 14 months later when we pulled out $1 million. That was, and again, that was the home run that was like, I really made it believable that that I could achieve this and that it would work. So,
it's awesome. I still remember that call that we had in that, and third party property management, and
you were like, fire them
yeah,
right now. Like they didn't tell you, like, gone, you need to fire them. Like, sounds good. So again, I didn't know back then, right? I was trying to, I thought I'd interviewed them correctly, but they were more focused on scaling than they were on actually running the property. And then, it also didn't realize just how much hands-on Class C property was going to be, because it was my first time. And that's what I try to always tell people is like, look, them, like, if you would have taken money from me back then, and I think I even offered it to you, I'm like, look, I will pay you for your time. Like, I'll pay you to kind of, and you had all kinds of other things going on. And you're like, look, just call me. If you need something, call me. And it was just those 2 or 3 phone calls that really helped me through that first year of getting that property done, where I'm like, hey, here's what I'm up against. What do you think? And you would either text or call and say, here, I would do this. And that's what I would go do. And it led to just a super successful exit on the refi, which then, put our trajectory to scale and grow massively. So, that's why I believe in it so much, and why we created the platform to try to help others. And, that's what we're trying to do. So
that's awesome. Like, success leaves clues. None of us are reinventing the wheel or trying to make water more wet or the wheel more round. Like, find somebody that's doing something like what Seth is doing, and just follow the success, copy what people are doing. And it's amazing. Like, all of the most successful CEOs are being mentored by somebody else. Somebody is always being mentored by somebody else. Like, they've been there, they've done that before. Like, if you want to try doing it on your own, you might be able to, but it's going to cost you a lot more money and a lot more time.
100%.
And if you weren't successful in that deal that we just talked about, there may not have been a second, third, fourth, fifth deal. So
100%. Yeah, absolutely. And that was the first time I took on a lot of outside capital that, like I said, that really put me under the gun, to where I was there every day, and I was going to die on that hill of, it was going to be successful, or I was going to, or I was going to die. Like, that was the way that I felt about it. And that's how we look at all of our stuff now, is that people put their money with us because they know that we will die on that hill of fighting for that deal to be successful before we ever lose a penny of theirs. And that just, people believe in that, or they know us, that's, we do a lot of the 506B syndications. So that it's people that know us that are most of our investors. And that's why they invest with us, is because they believe that and they know that. So anyways, well, I appreciate your time. Like I said, I'm not going to keep you any longer, but I could have you come back and do a whole call on crypto and all the different things I've learned from you on that. And, I'd love to do that at some point too. So
awesome, buddy. Thank you for having me. And, amazing. It's amazing the success you have. Congratulations on leaving. And it's awesome to see you finally break away from the golden handcuffs.
Yeah, that's it. So if you guys want to reach out to Jack, he obviously gave his cell phone, Petrick Property Group. You can check him out there. If you want to invest with his group, you can join the investor list. I know through the website. So look him up. I appreciate it, Jack.
Awesome, buddy. Thanks so much.
Uh-huh.